You never thought you'd see this. CNN has been making a sad play at relevance by attacking the Democratic Party's failed messaging, but it's occasionally giving you a peek into the fear in the eyes of the leftist media establishment. I think that's exactly what we saw on the CNN panel when Scott Jennings' one pointed question untangled the entire reason why the Democrats lost the election. Watch this for yourself before I tell you more about it.
There was a huge movement of Hispanic voters nationally from Democrat to Republican in this election, particularly among men. Just out of curiosity, as an old campaign operative, when you went to the doors, were you having most of your conversations with men or women? Who was answering the door, and what were most of your substantive conversations? Who was it with?
Well, first of all, I want to correct that in terms of Pennsylvania, what happened in Pennsylvania with the Latino vote.
Nationally.
I know what happened.
Broadly
but one of the things that I learned from this is that the lived experience of a Puerto Rican American citizen voter in Allentown, Pennsylvania, has very little in common with the lived experience of a Mexican-American voter who lives in Hidalgo, Texas, right by the border, right when people were coming across the border, when there was kind of chaos at the border, from the lived experience of a Cuban-American who lives in South Florida. These experiences, there's very little in common, and the lived experience of a Latino in Las Vegas, Nevada.
That's part of the problem.
Also,
people they put all Latinos together, but they're very diverse.
Could you believe that? A Democrat talking head finally coming to the realization that racial and ethnic groups are not a monolith? This is a truth that the rational segments across the spectrum had been screaming to the Democrats all the way back to the first year of the Biden administration when the Hispanic vote became evenly split between the parties. By the way, we drop truth bombs like this every day, so be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to be part of the conversation. Now, I think it reveals a kind of condescending attitude for the party toward these electorates to almost feel entitled to the Hispanic vote as some kind of a homogenous group. And that's just one of the ways in which identity politics has eaten at the core of the Democratic Party in this election. And the lived experience that she's talking about is really the main reason why the Hispanic voters in the country were unwillingly thrown on the front lines of the illegal immigration crisis, and no one in the administration was willing to listen. Here's counties in the United States with over 20% Hispanic population, and notice the amount of red you see on this map as a shift in the election toward the Republican Party. And that's not by accident, and neither is it a coincidence of race or identity. It's simply what this panel pretends to realize, which is that problems on the ground do much more to sway voters to another direction than any fancy ideology they are sold from their party. And that's what happens this time to the country's Latino and Hispanic population that's already largely concentrated along the border states. What's incredible is that these are realizations that the left-wing media is only talking about once they've decisively lost the election, instead of holding the Democrat political strategists to account that apparently didn't already know that a person from Pennsylvania and Texas could vote based on different proximal problems rather than lumping them together based on race.
What did surprise you the most when you were there on the ground in Pennsylvania? You talk about the disconnect between this sort of like celebrity-fueled campaign and what you were seeing when you're knocking on these doors.
Well, first of all, the severity of the hardship for working people in the United States these days, it was really eye-opening. I report about immigration, so I have been on the ground with working people quite a bit in my career, but it wasn't just the price of groceries. It wasn't just, it's the whole structure of work. People are doing contract work, they're working night shifts, day shifts, and also the way that people are communicating now. Very often, the only source of information that people had in Allentown was through their mobile phones. They don't have time to watch television. There was just a tremendous gap of communication with working people that I encountered, and most of the canvassing that I was doing was with Latino people, Spanish-speaking people.
So the Harris campaign, it sounds like, just missed it. I mean, even the Biden campaign leading up to it, they had to be dragged in a way to address the reality that people were feeling extreme economic hardship.
So now they're just framing it as a failure to reach people? Are we pretending that the message itself was anything but a disaster? For the record, yes, most Americans today get their news primarily on the internet rather than social media. Over 60% to be exact, according to a Pew Research poll a few years ago. But the fact that the party of progressives failed so massively on these progressive new technologies is truly ironic. And you know what that's doing now? It's pitting the left-wing mainstream media like CNN and MSNBC in a blame game with the Democrat leadership about why the media strategy backfired like this. why did Kamala Harris's carefully crafted and short interviews with the mainstream media combined fail to get these same views as one Trump podcast with Joe Rogan? It's because one side was at least willing to engage with two of the most important issues for American voters, being inflation and immigration, while the other side scolded their own electorate if they didn't want to vote for a woman or a person of color, and that was a continuation of identity politics that even those identity groups had grown tired of, which I think is what resulted in a massive sway of over 14% among Latino voters towards Donald Trump. That's despite the fact that the media tried to blow the Puerto Rico garbage joke out of proportion, and yet none of it seemed to create the kind of media dent they wanted, because the Trump campaign was focusing on a completely different media universe with alternative platforms and social media, and honestly, it was just a joke that Tony Hinchcliffe made. Who cares?
Reading your article, it also seemed like you adjusted your message after meeting a bunch of people. You were like, these people are having trouble with dental insurance. These people can't afford enough food. These people are struggling with this. We are told to miss this entire block of housing because we don't have a message for them. And I think that with all due respect and admiration to the Democratic leadership, things really, truly need to change. And I'm going to say that right out front. We absolutely lost the messaging war. If people in America did not know that the Democrats were the party that wanted to help them, we blew it. If they didn't know that we were the party that would support unions, we made a mistake. If they didn't know that paid family leave was in Build Back Better and would have been part of Harris's campaign,
you had the rap sheet of the policies. I mean, was that responsive to what people were experiencing?
It was, and it was just that I do fault not the Biden campaign, but the Biden White House for a complete failure of communication of what they were doing. We got out there and there really was no knowledge at all about what Biden administration had done. And interestingly enough, so people would say, well, Biden, my grocery prices have gone up. And I would say, well, actually, Joe Biden is not on the ballot. And they would go, oh, all right, Kamala Harris. So whether she was the vice president or none of that was at a level of communication for these folks.
That's truly incredible to hear. I think the fight that started back in 2015 between the liberal mainstream media and Donald Trump has finally ended with the MSM completely denuded of any relevance. Forget influencing elections or shaping narratives. It's not even an effective tool of getting the message out anymore for these political parties, and that power is never coming back. Perhaps they were momentarily fooled by the brief rise in their relevance in relation to Trump in 2016. If you look at polls from the last 10 years, you see both the Democrat and Republican base consistently reporting lower and lower trust in the mainstream media every year, except in the years after 2016 when the Democrat voters report a lot more trust as the Republicans reported a sudden drop. But that period proven to be one of the most high before the mainstream media finally became a hollow husk of its former self forever. Even liberal pundits and hosts like Van Jones have come out recently to announce something big. The mainstream media is now the fringe media, and the fringe media is now the mainstream.
And I'm telling you, we are way off. The entire political class is way off. First of all, digital is a new door knocking. Mm-hmm. You got to understand that. We were laughing our butts off at Donald Trump for suspending his door knocking campaign and letting Charlie Kirk and Elon do a bunch of stuff online. Mm-hmm. We said, these guys are idiots. These guys are stupid. Then you start knocking on these doors. You know what people come to the door with? Their phone in their hand. They're in a 24-hour digital surround sound that has nothing to do with CNN, has nothing to do with any stuff that we do. The mainstream has become fringe, and the fringe has become mainstream. There are platforms, there are people out there that are getting 14 million streams, and we're on cable news getting 1 or 2 million. And so there is a whole world out there. Kellyanne Conway, I hate to agree with her, but I do a lot of times. Donald Trump understood that and we didn't. And that's not just Democrats that don't. The entire political class is way off.
Van Jones may just be saying it, but the rest of the media is painfully feeling it. That's because many of these liberal pundits understand that they are just not cut out for the ruthless world of online media, and people like Don Lemon have proven that, and as their relevance erodes, it seems like we're just seeing an infighting between the Democratic establishment and their media mouthpieces that have fed on each other for years. But let me know in the comments how you process all of this, because I don't think legacy media is going to retain any relevance in these next 4 years of the Trump presidency.